Hello and welcome back to Building Wealth on the Go, podcast by KLT Wealth Management. Today is January 21st, 2025, and we are back with Season 6, Episode 1 of our podcast. I'm your host, Brad Wilson, joined by my colleague, Courtney Beach. We are one short this week, so it is just Courtney and I running with the show for the month of January, but we've got lots to dive into. It's a new year, new season of the podcast, so we thought we'd kick it off right with some pretty informative and I think some important conversations around setting yourself up right for the new year. So let's dive right into it. Let's not waste any times with this today, Courtney. Let's dive into our main topic right off the bat which is setting goals for the year. And we're big on pushing sort of the framework. You see it out there a lot, the SMART framework when it comes to setting goals. So why don't you dive in, explain a little bit about the SMART framework and what it all means and why it's sort of important there.
Yeah, so the idea of creating a SMART goal is to keep yourself focused on your goals. So many people kind of stick a sticky note for their goal on the board, and then that's all it amounts to. So the SMART goals is kind of like to drill down in to what you actually want, and it makes you build a framework to get to that goal. So it is an acronym, SMART. So you want your goals to be as specific as possible. I want to retire at this time. I want this kind of lifestyle, for example. You want it to be measurable. So you want to know how much you're going to need, for instance, in this example, retirement. So that you know how close you are to getting to that goal. So how much do you need? Work with your advisor, figure out how much you need to achieve this goal. It needs to be assignable. Who's going to do what? Because there's going to be a lot of tasks to create to accomplish your financial goals. So who's going to manage the budget? Who's going to make the RSP contributions? Who's going to, be opening the accounts? Like whose names are they going to be about? So you got to do that. Then they got to be realistic. I mean, I would love to say I'm going to have a whirlwind retirement and travel the world, but that's probably not realistic for most people. Or if it's for school, I want my kid to spend 10 years and become a world-renowned philosopher. Well, that might not be realistic for your budget either. So you need to be realistic, and you need to set a time frame for yourself. I'm going to retire at 65. My kid's going to go to school at 18, and he or she is going to go for 4 years. You need to have that time frame so that you know what you're shooting for.
Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of drill deeper into those goals that you have. And it can be something really, really small. We're at a new year, setting up something, for example, like building an emergency fund. Mm-hmm. We live in a world where there's so many unexpected expenses that can come up. Your car breaks down. It's freezing cold out there today. You might have to get a tow truck to come if your battery doesn't start in your car. There's lots that can come that way. So setting up an emergency fund's a great example of a SMART goal. There's your specific measurement. I want a $3,000 emergency fund. Well, that's the specific, the measurable, it's $3,000. Mm-hmm. Who's going to do it? Well, I think I'm going to put aside money from my paycheck each month. It's my responsibility. Is it realistic? Well, yeah, I think I can put aside $250 a month into that emergency fund when looking at my expenses. And then, 12 months is my time frame. I'm going to make sure by the end of this year that that's hit. So those are sort of some of the frameworks on how you would break it down, and maybe one goal that you might look at. But Courtney, what are some of the other goals, or what are the trends that people are using SMART goals to build out savings plans with right now?
Yeah, the biggest one always in our industry is retirement, which is why we used it as our example. And a lot of people, when they come in to our office fresh, their idea is, I want to retire at 65 or I want to retire at 60. They have no idea how to do it. They might have been saving for a while, but they don't know what tools they need to do it. So when we talk, so that is definitely the biggest one, retirement. And when it comes to some goals, you do need to bring in help. Sometimes you need a financial advisor. Sometimes you need a lawyer. If it's like an estate plan, you need to bring in a lawyer or an accountant. So keep that in mind as well. RESPs, getting your kids into school, is become a bigger trend for couples with kids or parents with kids. A new one that's kind of emerged in the last few years is saving for a home. It's down payments have skyrocketed, and now we have the first home savings account. So
Hmm.
people are actually, strategizing. Okay, do I save in a home, first home savings account, or do I save in a TFSA, or do I do the RSP and pull money out of my RSP on the home buyers plan? And I think the other one goal that's trending now is budgeting. The rates went up, costs have gone up, and people are focusing on paying down and managing their debts because they are big now.
Yeah. No, I think that is really important. And you might have short-term goals. A lot of these sound they're daunting tasks far
Mm-hmm.
away, but utilizing the framework helps to kind of bring you back to today. And it's not to say you can't use SMART goals for fun things like travel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Travel's a big one. But I think it's important people say, they'll splurge on a trip right away. But if you put that SMART framework into that goal that I want to go to a five-star resort in the Dominican, or I want to go 2 weeks in Italy, that you can set yourself up with a time frame that works, it's manageable, and you're not worrying about putting it on the credit card and dealing with it later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's, SMART goal is really important. But one of the big takeaways from sort of this conversation as well, Courtney, you talked a lot about different types of accounts, saving for a
Mm-hmm.
home. There's lots of strategy that gets involved with smart financial goals now. And I think that's where the financial planning, meeting with an advisor, there's lots of resources online as well that
Mm-hmm.
educate yourself, learn about the options, talk to people, because there's lots of things that can happen out there. And I think that's where utilizing that can be important.
Yeah. And one of the other key benefits of having SMART goals is confidence. You have a plan, you know where it's at, you can measure your progress, there's accountability in there. So it builds confidence because if you don't have SMART goals, you're just kind of throwing darts at a board, not knowing
Mhm.
where to aim. So
Yeah.
that's what I like about the SMART goals.
No, for sure. And kind of tying into, saving for retirement, setting smart goals, we'll move on to RRSPs. It is that time of year where we flipped into the new year, and the government is so gracious to give us the first 60 days of the new year to figure out what was your income level for the previous year,
Mm-hmm.
and decide if you need to make any further RSP contributions. And if you do it within the first 60 days, you'll get a tax receipt that you can then use for the previous year's tax return. So for this year, we have until March 3rd to make a
Mm-hmm.
contribution, and you'll get a slip that you can use when you file your 2024 taxes this year. So a really
Yeah.
great tool to strategize and kind of work with your advisor, look at your income, and decide if that is something of benefit to you.
Yeah. So the government, to be clear, gives you 18% of your earned income up to a certain amount every year. And then that carries forward in your lifetime. So if you don't use your previous years, you can use them later. So it's always wise to sit down with your accountant or with your tax software in the months of January and February and do a quick calculation and see, okay, do I benefit from a little bit extra in my RSP this year?
Yeah. And maybe you had a life event happen in 2024. Maybe you sold a cottage, you sold a rental property, you've got maybe a big capital gain from some investments. And you're under the age of 71, right? And you can make an RSP contribution. You've got room. Doing a lump sum early in the year is a great way to offset taxes that you might owe within the next 2 months following. So that's kind of a great way to strategize. A lot of people don't like RSPs, especially if you've got a pension.
Mm-hmm.
And to that, I say, RSPs can be a nice supplement, especially if you're pushing into higher tax brackets with a pension. There's a big jump from the 33 to the 43% tax bracket. That's a 10% jump. And if you can, make enough contributions to get you out of that top level tax bracket, you're going to save yourself 10% right there, and 43% on that dollar that you put into the RSP. So really important to run some numbers if you feel
Mm-hmm.
like you're close there. Even if you've got a pension and you haven't thought about RSPs, it is an important thing to look at.
Yeah, and there's also some people who save their whole year to put that RSP contribution in. On the flip side, if you do your quick calculation and you find that, yeah, I have the room, but it doesn't really benefit me that much, that's where you would put money in a TFSA or a first home savings account, depending on your goals. And then you'll have retirement money that's more flexible if for the TFSA, or you'll have money for your first home.
Yeah. And a strategy down the road is you can always, if you feel the RSP is not valuable this year, but might be down the road, you can always move money from a tax-free savings account to a RSP in any given year to make that top up if you don't have the cash on hand and you need the tax break.
Yeah, because remember, the first home savings account, you do get the tax rate, but now it's for this year instead of 2024 because the
Yeah.
deadline already passed for that.
Yeah, so that is a very important thing as we kind of talk about tax breaks. Is the first home savings account when they launched that a few years ago was on that calendar year schedule, not the we call it the February to February schedule that the
Yeah.
RSPs are on. So that is good on the RSP. So make sure to check out and take a look at that. And with that, we'll kind of move into the market outlook now that we are into the new year. And I guess there's been a little bit of action in the world in the last couple of days, but it has been a bit of an interesting year. I think a little bit of people trading with a little bit of caution out the gates. We saw the markets pull back a few percentages, U.S. markets. To start the year, and then within the last week leading up to, and we had the inauguration of Donald Trump yesterday, as of we're filming this, and the markets have kind of been ramping up to that, but I think there's big focus on earnings this year.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, so earnings have started to come in. I'm sure by the time this airs, more have come in. So the financials have already reported, and they've done better than expected. So just for the use of those of you out there who don't understand how that works, is usually companies give an estimate, a forecast of how much earnings they make in a quarter, and that gets priced into the stock market and how they value the stock. So if they overshoot and they did better than expected, then the stock price tends to go up because the company's worth more, they make more revenue, they might give a bigger dividend. And if they underperform, then the stock tends to go down for this exact reverse reason.
Yeah, exactly. So lots of focus on earnings. And given that Trump just took office yesterday, the first kind of 60 days in office, first 90 days in office, there can be some volatility. He was signing executive orders like he was eating pancakes yesterday. So, they were just flying off the shelf. And then you don't really know, right? Like it's an interesting time. Yesterday, you saw the bunch of billionaires in the room as he was being inaugurated. And so, are those businesses going to benefit right away? Is it going to be a long-term thing? Are we going to see volatility? There's a lot of questions surrounding that. And what is going to be the key driver of that is really unknown at this point.
Yeah, and the market doesn't like uncertainty. So I am predicting we're going to have ups and downs the next few months until the market and people feel reassured as to what direction the United States is going, because they're the biggest economy and they affect a lot of people. So a lot depends on them when it comes to the markets.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, yeah, there'll be lots to watch in sort of the next little bit. I think the markets are responding favorably today after what was the inauguration yesterday. There was a holiday. It was Martin Luther King Jr. Day as well yesterday, so that markets were closed. But moving forward, it'll be interesting to kind of track as things go. But on that note, I want to touch a little on the Canadian economy. We got reports from inflation today. Inflation, again, below 2% here in Canada. So you're likely to see the Bank of Canada continue to kind of push those rates down pretty quick here. There's also fears that if Trump does impose tariffs, that will be a little bit more detrimental to our Canadian economy as well. Even if we do fight back with retaliatory tariffs, it could still push our, some deflationary pressures into Canada. So I think the Bank of Canada is realizing that, and we're going to see likely another interest rate cut. I believe it is on Friday this week. So lots to look at and monitor as we move forward through February and the beginning half of this year. With that being said, we will head into sort of the final part of today's podcast, kicking off the year. Lots of information out the get-go. Joe is not here for his tip of the month, so I'm going to take over. It's going to be Brad's tip of the month this year, sort of tying everything all together. that we talked about with SMART goals. My biggest one is budgeting and creating a spending and savings plan. The new year, everyone's got their New Year's resolutions. I think it's almost a must that you sit down with your spouse, or if you're single, you sit down yourself, put a spreadsheet together, write it out on a piece of paper if that works better for you, and really see what money is coming in, what are your necessary expenses, and what do you have left over. And what you have left over, I think it's really important to decide where do you want that money to go towards, right? Do you have debts that you want to pay down quicker? Do you want to put money away for a future SMART goal that you might have, a financial SMART goal? Do you want to spend that going out and have hobbies that cost money? Do you want to eat out at restaurants? What does that discretionary spending look like? But have that budget and then check in on a monthly basis with how you're doing. I think it's really important, and you can set yourself up great for success now here in January and into February with a plan for the year. And if you can stick to it pretty regularly, you'll feel more confident. Like Courtney said, setting those goals, you'll feel more confident in what you've got ahead for you. And it doesn't hurt to kind of set that money aside for rainy day funds, emergency funds, because this world, you don't know when something's going to go, and those unexpected expenses. So I think setting up that budget, setting up that spending and savings plan, really, really important.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just about being aware of where the money's going. Because how many times you're like you had some money in your pocket and you don't know where you spent it. I
Yeah.
don't know about you, Brad, but I find that sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where it's important to track, right? Sometimes you have months where you're going to spend more on something than other, and it's not about, one of the things when we talk about budgeting is it's not so much. We have a lot of expenses that might be every 2 months, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, but it's about averaging that out over the year. Okay, and that's where that slush fund comes into. Okay, those months I'm going to need that money, but over the course of the year, what inflows and outflows are coming in, and then your sort of discretionary monthly spending, you kind of know what that might be. So
Right.
it's important to be aware of that because and it's not about there's a right or wrong of where you're spending your money. It's your money, you can do what you want, but you at the end of the day need to be okay with where your money's going and where you've spent it. So if it is $200 a month at Starbucks, but you're happy and okay with that, then that's more, all the power to you, right? So yeah, so that is it. So that is the tip of the month. Big thank you to everyone who has been with us through the first 5 seasons of this podcast. We're excited to kind of kick off season 6 here in January. Lots of information in a short time frame, probably under 20 minutes here for your quick podcast listen this month, but we'll be back next month with more great content. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, give a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're listening on, and we'll see you next month.